All right, we're back at it again. I don't want to show you the answer already. Jeez. All right, so Natas 24. Similar to Natas 23, where we're presented with an input field, a login button, and some source code. And with this one, I played around with it, hoping that it would be similar to the last, just because that's what crazy people do. They repeat themselves over and over and over, hoping for a different result, doing the same task. I think Einstein said that, or maybe it was Elvis Presley. I don't know. Just kidding. I know it's Einstein or Benjamin Franklin, whatever. Anywho, so this one is an interesting one. So if you input information here, it tells you you're wrong. Remember last time we said, okay, if we do I love you to basically defeat the loose comparison instead of the strict comparison, but that's not the case here either. So we jump to the source code, and I have the source code here. And of course, Morla is still there. And we're just going to look at this small PHP snippet because everything else is really irrelevant at the moment. And in this small PHP snippet, what we're doing is instead of doing a comparison that we did last time where we basically were comparing a string to an integer, and that string was eventually overthrowing that integer because of the loose comparison and not strict comparison, now we're actually doing a function called string comparison. And with string comparison, and also let me back up, I cheated as per usual. That's the name of the game. And I came to this blog, Security Write-Ups. It was helpful to kind of give me a good step in the right direction. I didn't cheat completely, I cheated slightly. And to cheat slightly, what I do is I kind of slowly work my way down the page, and I try not to look at the answer. I just read little snippets here, and I try to kind of guess, ooh, that's not good, and try to guess what they're hitting at. And I think there was a point down here where they basically Googled this, and I was like, all right, if they Googled it, I'm gonna Google it. And I probably should have done that prior because it's obviously something that it's a bit of an obvious thing where you see the only function in here is string comparison, so you should look for vulnerabilities in that. Anywho, so I Googled that, started Googling around, found string comparison, read a bit about what it does, and here you can see basically the gist of what this is doing is that it's comparing two strings, hence the name string comparison. So we're going to compare this string with this string, and if they're equal, then it's 0. If they're not equal, then it's -1, I think, or +1, depending on the comparison that you're doing. And the font on this coloring is massive. Why is it so big? You need to fix this, people. Because I don't like it when the dot's that big. Throws me off. How about this? That's more like it. All right. Yes. All right, cool. So string comparison. So we can see we're comparing a string to a string. And then we're going to get an integer out that shows you the comparison of what that is. If I scroll down a bit further, you're going to see some examples of that. So here you can see we're doing var1 versus var2. We can see that if it's not equal to 0, then it's true. And it's basically stating that they're not equal due to the fact that it's a binary comparison. Because if you come up here, they mentioned that this is case sensitive. And the reason being is they're probably pulling it down into, binary safe comparison. Because they're probably pulling that string into a binary format and then comparing the two binary strings, so the ones and zeros instead of just the text itself. So that's kind of what it looks like. That's the output. So that was useful. But actually, interestingly enough, if you just scroll down a bit further, you'll see that the very first comment from 9 years ago is talking about the unsafe. Basically, if you're trying to do a safe comparison between two strings, it's best to typecast those strings or force them to be strings. Because if you come down a bit further here, you'll see that the examples they provided, if you provide something that's not a string inside of this string comparison, then it's going to return an error, and that error is going to be null. And you can see that here. And specifically, we'll run an array in there. So what our goal here is basically is to, instead of providing a string input into our request field, which is our input field here, we're actually going to drop in not a string, but something that's a different data type. And for us, we're going to do an array. And it's going to compare that should be string, an array, to this string here, which is censored. And if they're not equal, if they're not equal, then it's going to print the credentials for the next level. But before I do that, I'm going to walk you through some additional things that I read to help me get to that next step. So this presentation was useful. I found through another blog that I was reading, and in this presentation, at the very end of it, after getting through 36 slides, they actually talk about string comparison as well as a bonus bug. And then here you can see them actually doing a shoving an array into a comparison, because here they're basically doing an array in comparison to a string, and then they're going to get a null out of that, and that null, that error is going to actually give them access to whatever they're trying to get access to. Here's another thing. So string comparison, we already talked through that. This answer. I needed to figure out how arrays were basically typed out specifically. So I looked up arrays to try to figure out, okay, how is an array created and what does it look like in PHP? And reason being is actually I came in here initially, I was like, okay, if it's an array, then if I just type an array here like that, then it should work, because I'm doing, password equals array. But the issue is here is that the password piece here is taking what we've input and then forcing it into a string. So this array is going to be a string when it's forced into the password piece here. So the key thing here is actually taking this entire request and manipulating it before it actually has the chance to bundle whatever you've input into the text field and formatting it into a string. So what we need to do there is we need to figure out a different way to actually type array. So when coming down and reading through array and understanding what an array is, and simply put, an array is basically a data structure of doing basically an index and a value. So you have a key for an index and then you have a value, and that basically can be A equals 1, B equals 2, and it's just it's a similar kind of data structure that you'd see in a lot of different coding, learning about coding and things like that. The thing that jumped out to me here was actually this note here stating that there's two different ways to write an array. So you can write an array like I did previously, or you can actually write it in shorter form, which is the 2 brackets. And you can see the 2 examples here. So this is an array for the long form, so you're saying array as the function itself, and then you're doing your index and your value here. Or you can actually write it in shorter form, which uses our brackets here without the term array or the function, and you have your index foo and your value bar, index bar and value foo. So this shorter form is actually what we want and what we're going to use. Reason being is that if you come in here and actually try to add array tacked onto password without the equals, you still get nothing. But if you come in here, and I'm actually going to try something here. So if you just drop this in here, it tells you wrong. Reason being is, like, remember how I said it's forcing that piece there from after the equals into a string format. So if we actually bypass that altogether and just put in our array directly after the password, it's going to error out. It's going to tell us that basically the string comparison function that we looked at here is accepts only strings, and what you're putting in parameter 1 is not a string. So in that case, I'm going to error out, and once it errors out, it's going to give me this password. And the reason it's giving me the password is because this string comparison specifically isn't asking for the 2 things to be equal, but it's asking for the 2 things to be not equal, because you can see the exclamation point here. So if there's an exclamation point before really anything, it's basically saying not instead of for something to be true, right? So by doing that, we got our password in Natas 25. So internet, I think we're making some serious progress right now. I'm proud of you, and you should be proud of you as well. So I'll see you on 25.